everybody in the world.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always with the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of today's show, I do want to remind you as always that if you haven't done so already, to consider availing yourselves of the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube, as well as our website, gsmcpodcast.net, to better contribute and interact with the show a little bit more directly. Best way to get your opinions, feedback, input out here on air, or any tips or donations will also be genuinely appreciated, and just makes our shows that much better when you, our faithful audience, are contributing to them. Without further ado, let's jump right into our second set of today's show, continue ranking our top 5 in the MLB at each respective position, starting off with one over from our first baseman on the base pass, the second baseman. Another list that could see a lot of skeptics in the comments, but still a pretty fluid list. Could be interchangeable with a lot of different guys. A lot of different guys also in free agency, potentially shaking up different infields around the MLB. So who knows where some of these guys might end up. A lot of them very versatile in how many positions they can ultimately play. But I still think that this list combines a lot of versatility, power, and defensive prowess. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting off at number 5, a guy who wears many hats for this New York Yankees team, may have to wear a lot more considering the fact that they've looked a little bit more defensive in terms of their approach in the offseason by signing more defensive-minded players in Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger to replace the loss of Juan Soto. But this guy certainly can be an X-factor and catalyst in terms of that offensive production that they may need throughout the year. And that will be Jazz Chisholm. This is a guy who has not just played at second base. He's been someone who has played at shortstop, center field, third base throughout his career. Very versatile player. And primarily, the reason is that the Yankees believe that defense could be an interchangeable thing for a player like Jazz Chisholm. It's his offense that what really matters to this lineup. Last year, he had 24 homers and 40 stolen bases, and those were career highs, along with the number of RBIs he hit, his batting average, and games played. That just goes to show that Jazz Chisholm will forever become a little bit more important year in, year out for this Yankees squad. And so, even though the Yankees project to get better defensively, Jazz Chisholm is a reminder that this lineup still has pop within it. And this lineup can get going at any given time on the offensive side. Mark my words, y'all should still be scared of the Yankees as a offensive-minded team. So, the fact that I believe that Jazz Chisholm is the 5th best second baseman in the MLB and could still play multiple positions in the infield and outfield defensively and still put up the numbers he does offensively just go to show how versatile several players are in this Yankees roster. Now let's get to perhaps the most underappreciated, underrated player on my list. Kind of overshadowed because A, his team is not a playoff contender, and B, there have been a lot of rumors and rumblings about a certain player on this particular team who could be making his exit. But this player still needs to be acknowledged, and that's why I included him in this list. Could be forever rising up the rankings throughout his career, Mr. Brendan Donovan of the St. Louis Cardinals. And like I said, if St. Louis were a playoff contender, you guys probably would have heard his name a lot more, and he very well could be a little bit higher on this list. But to acknowledge him, he has been one of the most steadily instinctual players defensively for the Cardinals, and also really significantly impacting their offense these past 3 seasons. Has a career OBP in his 3 seasons of 364, a 116 OPS plus, 9th best mark in OAA, 13.7% K rate, and 119 WRC plus. So Brendan Donovan combines a lot of different traits that make him a very appealing prospect to rise up these rankings and be the next great second baseman. But for now, I really want to see how the St. Louis Cardinals team pans out. If the whole Nolan Arenado talks extend into the season and it becomes a bit of a distraction for a team that's already not going to contend, how will Brendan Donovan project? And also, how do a lot of these players in the Cardinals farm system coming up impact his ability defensively to actually make an impact at his preferred position? Because there could be a lot of movement in this team defensively that could see him shift potentially to the outfield where he's currently projected on ESPN to play. So Brendan Donovan is a fantastic player. And at the second base spot, I've been holding it down for the past 3 seasons aptly for this St. Louis Cardinals team. But the question will be, how will different conversations about this team impact their ultimate goal, which is to contend? And I don't really see that happening this particular season. But I do want to acknowledge a player who's kind of an aberration, what's going to be a middling team this next season. Then number 3, one of my favorite players in the MLB because he plays for one of my favorite teams, Marcus Semien of the Texas Rangers. Kind of had a little bit of a down year last year. Everyone on the Texas Rangers had a down year after winning the World Series 2 years ago. Still a 3-time All-Star. He still doesn't necessarily strike out that often, but he does have a bit of a sense of decline in his game from last season. His OBP dipped last season to 308. He still hit 23 home runs and scored 101. So you can see that even though some of these players had down years last year, they're still considered the best at their position because their down years are still exceptional years in this period of time in the MLB. But Marcus Semien is not just someone who can hit for average and power. He's someone on the defensive side of things that's really going to lock down that position for Texas for the time being. Last year, he only ranked behind Bryce Terang and Andres Jimenez in defensive runs saved. And that's pretty impressive considering the fact that the Rangers brought him in to kind of hold down this position for the next couple of years. I believe he's in his 3rd year or 4th year of his current contract. So a lot of good things to come for Marcus Semien. But we're going to have to see not just him, of this entire Rangers lineup start to hit a bit better, start to improve a bit more. Because Marcus Semien is just a small piece of what I think the Rangers are capable of doing this season. But he's a very important piece because he's one of the best, not just offensive players on this team, but defensive ones as well. So that's something to note if you're going to be following the Texas Rangers this season, and especially a guy like Marcus Semien. Let's see if he can keep up the good work defensively and get back to the numbers we expect him to put up offensively as well. Then at number 2, a great player, a rival in my many rights, Jose Altuve. And this has been a weird topic to discuss in terms of Altuve's position, just because of what happened with Alex Bregman, how he was very vocal in terms of being willing to shift to left field so that Alex Bregman could stay at his normal position in the hot corner. But I do feel Altuve is someone who has been immaculate defensively for them, but now has shown signs of regression. So I feel if the Astros want to move him to left field, then it would be a pretty easy decision because he wouldn't necessarily be in the infield and really just thrown out there as a weaker second baseman than he was in the past. But he still is someone who could give you production and pop offensively as well. He's 35 in May, but he's still someone who can hit for power. He batted .295 last year and 185 hits and adjusted OPS plus of 126. Can reach the 2,400 hit and 250 homer benchmarks in his career, truly standing the test of time as one of the most consistent second basemen in the MLB throughout his career. But I do feel that the regression in his defensive game is reminiscent of the Astros being willing to do whatever they can to not make him a liability defensively. So who knows how he's going to project defensively, but at the very least, he's still going to hit for power for you. And that's ultimately what I think the Houston Astros need more than anything. Who cares about the defensive side of things? They need more power in their lineup, and Jose Altuve can provide that at the very least for another couple of years. But he has been supplanted at the number one spot by someone who I really like, Ketel Marte of the Arizona Diamondbacks, a young stud. If not for Shohei Ohtani, and if not for getting injured in the second half of the season last year, we'd be talking about Ketel Marte very much being in the MVP discussions in the NL. And he was a huge part as well of the Diamondbacks' run to the World Series just 2 years ago. He garnered 6.8 WAR in 136 games last year, had 36 homers and scored 93 runs. So in that period of time, he's really shown that he's someone who can provide pop for an Arizona Diamondbacks team that still is in that period of time where they're contending, but maybe they don't have their exact identity just yet. They got to the World Series with a combination of power and defense, not necessarily relying too much on their hitting prowess, but now they're in a period of time where they expect to contend in the NL West, and Ketel Marte is a huge reason as to why they can do it, and most importantly, as to why we can start to project this Arizona Diamondbacks team to become elite offensively. Because a lot of these younger guys are now going to start to hit for power, and combined with their ability to play defense so well and their pitching staff that's very deep, I can make a case for the Diamondbacks to compete in this league for the next 5 to 10 years. And it's highly reminiscent of players such as this, and that's why he has supplanted one of the greats at the position in the past couple of years, Jose Altuve, as the best second baseman, in my humble opinion, in the MLB going into this year. Let me know what you think in the comments below, because I truly appreciate all these players, some a little bit more than others, some maybe waiting to crack into the top 3 like Brendan Donovan and Jazz Chisholm, but ultimately I want to hear your input. But coming up next, we transition to the world of the NBA to talk about a potential revenge game. The first game between these two opponents since that aforementioned trade we mentioned earlier in this episode, the Mavs and Lakers. That game is going to be discussed right after this short break.
Looking for